Maria Rapetskaya. First, some supporters to thank, and thank you for listening. This episode is supported by CCW Digital, leaders responsible for operations, information technology, contact centers, customer care, service, and support are invited to register for a free CCW Digital membership. Membership includes networking with 100,000 plus qualified industry professionals, quarterly executive research reports, product matchmaking, and more. Go to ccwdigital.com to join the community. This episode is also supported by the CCW Conference and Expo. The event will empower you to test, learn, and try the next big thing in customer experience optimization. Are you interested in mining data across touch points for personalized and predictive data? Are you trying to integrate your systems to get a more complete view of the customer? Are you figuring out what innovations to invest in? Chatbots, virtual assistants, AI, VR, biometrics, to name a few? Go to callcenterweek.com to register. Maria Rapetskaya joins us from C2 Montreal, where she takes us through her unique and personal background. She was born and raised initially in Leningrad in the former Soviet Union. Her daring mother, who was an entrepreneur in the USSR, something nearly impossible to do, brought her to the United States before the Berlin Wall fell, meaning that when she was an early teenager in Brooklyn, New York, she had different fish to fry. She notes that arriving in America had her realize that being smart wasn't cool anymore. Coming out of a communist country, it was a big adjustment to figure out what to wear to school, which is what led Maria to have a propensity to communicate a brand message. She simply looks at branding or rebranding from the outside in, giving her a truly unique perspective. Welcome to CCW Digital on B2B IQ. I'm your host, Seth Adler. Download episodes on ccwdigital.com or through our app in iTunes, within the iTunes podcast app, in Google Play, or wherever you currently get your podcasts. Maria Rapetskaya.
Land of 6,000 people.
Yeah, so we're here at C2, Montreal. I guess we should define undefined creative right at the top, which must be a frustrating thing for you to have to do.
No, I get that question all the time.
Yeah.
So Undefined Creative is a media production agency, and we specialize in motion graphics.
Okay. And you have worked with the NHL, you've worked with MoMA, you've worked with NYC, you've worked with a bunch of people. You've worked with the UN?
We've worked with the UN.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably one of the more interesting moments in my career.
Let's jump in right there.
Well, I got to do the graphics for the live screens for the Equator Prize Awards.
Okay, what was this and when was this?
So this was in 2010, and the Equator Prize Awards is something that the United Nations does. I think it's part of the UNDP, the development program.
Okay.
And so they, it's basically, they give out recognition to people and places that are doing just tremendous things for their communities. And so they do a really big event in New York every year, every couple of years. I'm not too sure. But they need graphics for the screens. Yeah. So did a bunch of those and got invited to the ceremony.
Oh.
And it was at the Museum of Natural History. Have you been there?
Of course. This is one of my favorite places on Earth.
Do you know the blue whale?
Of course.
Okay, so nothing ever beat watching my work play down underneath the blue whale.
Exactly. And for people that have been to the Museum of Natural History, they understand what you're talking about. For New Yorkers, they certainly know what you're talking about. And if you haven't been there,
it's a life-size skeleton of a blue whale in a giant room.
I think it's more. I don't know what they call it, but it's not a skeleton. It's like a blue whale. It's like
right.
Yeah. It's like really there.
People want, like I get the question of like, oh, do you get a kick out of seeing your stuff on TV? And I'm like,
no,
like
yeah.
I've seen it under a big blue whale.
Yeah.
Like you can't beat that.
Did you see Noah Baumbach's The Squid in the Whale? Because that is a reference to the Museum of Natural History.
Really?
But it's one of the little exhibits within that same room. It's not that blue whale that he's talking about.
Yeah, because there is a bunch of stuff that just gets overlooked because there's a big blue whale.
Indeed. So we must digress, though, right? So so graphics, okay, fine. But if again, I'm still trying to define, right, undefined. And so how frustrating is it for you to have to say that you're an agency? How frustrating is it for you to have these conversations, right?
Well, what I usually say is I give the line, which is motion production agency specializing in motion graphics.
Sure.
And then I watch and see how much people's eyes glaze over.
Right.
And at that point, I gauge how much of that I need to explain.
Okay.
A lot of people get what an agency is. A lot of people get what media production is. Some people get motion graphics, which is basically animation.
If I'm a chief marketing officer, chief experience officer, chief customer experience officer, those are the type of people that are listening. So I have a better idea of what you're talking about. But why would I turn to you? You know, if I am the NHL, if I am, MoMA, what's the secret sauce?
My background actually is in broadcast television. That's what I started doing. And it was called broadcast design back then.
Mm-hmm.
And we did show graphics.
Uh-huh.
Right? So
Chirons.
No, not chirons. We would actually...
the graphics
but
for the
I
show.
am surprised you know that word.
Oh.
I check.
Thank you. Thank you. Traditionally, what I say is I'm all looks, and so anything that comes out is a bonus for all of us.
Well, Chiron, that's special. No, we would actually do the graphic images that people would then Chiron over.
And it grew from there. All right.
And then we do show titles and network IDs and things like that.
Yeah.
And then probably about 7 or 8 years ago, when the internet finally could play down video in real time for most people, that's when the job got really interesting, because TV started becoming less and less of our market. And people would call us for things like explainer videos or awareness videos or, nowadays, social media video.
Give me something for that.
For social media video?
No, in other words... That's what they would say to you.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess your kind of...
My response is yes.
Yeah, I'll do it, sure. But the whole thing is, okay, what's the brand? What's the story? What content are we trying to create? It doesn't matter what platform. As we discussed under the Blue Whale, it doesn't matter where it's going to be shown.
As long as it's a screen.
All right. So I was trying to kind of guess your accent. I got it wrong because we're here in Montreal. I guessed Canada because I'm kind of
that was easy.
Hearing that. And then I tried to kind of identify you through your last name, and I said that it was Polish, and you said it was. But you said the name is Polish. And so now we're just going to uncover everything. Where were you born?
So I was born in St. Petersburg.
Russia.
Yes.
I see.
I am so proud of people when they don't say Florida.
Oh, well, yeah, that's fair. So Anastasia, she's from St. Petersburg, right?
We have many women named Anastasia, but yes.
But the folklore tale, right? With her and Rasputin.
Peter the Great.
Yes, of course. All right, but you grew up in a different time in St. Petersburg. At least you were just born there.
I was born in Leningrad.
Oh,
I never lived in St. Petersburg.
Oh, wow.
I never lived in Russia. I've only lived in what is now known as the former Soviet Union.
So this means that you're Generation X, right? Or do you not identify that way?
I always get confused on those.
Are you born after 1985?
I am not born. I am so unfortunately not born after 1985.
Are you born after 1980?
I am. God, this is a really bad game.
Yeah. Is the answer no?
The answer is no. I am not born
after 1980. So then you're Gen X, Maria. I'm identifying with you as a fellow Gen X person.
Is that where that's the final cutoff?
That's really it. Yeah, exactly.
Darn.
So it just is what it is.
It is what it is.
But your point being, you remember the Berlin Wall falling.
I do.
Yeah. So you were a kid at the time.
I was.
And what did that do for you? Did you understand what was happening? If we're talking about the redefinition of the land that you come from, did you understand that was happening in real time?
You know, I did to some degree, but I was, 12 or so, 11. It was right. All of that was happening shortly after we've landed in the States, and being a 11-year-old in Brooklyn in a school where you're in the ESL program and everything is a little bit weird and you don't know. I mean, my own universe was so complicated at the moment that thinking about a wall falling across the pond, it didn't compute.
Because I need to figure out all of these people. I need to make friends.
Yeah, because all of a sudden, I'm in an environment where like being smart isn't cool anymore, and I've got to figure out what that takes now, which is clearly a very different problem than the Berlin Wall falling.
Being smart isn't cool anymore. So what you're saying is...
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
When you were in St. Petersburg, the community and society rewarded you for being intelligent.
Absolutely.
And when you got to Brooklyn, where in Brooklyn?
South Brooklyn, Midwood.
Okay. That was different. So what did your kind of colleagues or fellow children... How did they admonish you for being smart?
It wasn't even a question of whether or not intelligence registered on the social pecking order.
Okay.
It was more trying to discover what kind of sneaker registered on the social pecking order. And for a kid coming out of a communist country, that is a very weird thing.
We don't do sneakers.
I mean, you were lucky if you had sneakers.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, it was, we went to school in uniforms.
Right.
It was a really big adjustment to have to think about what I'm going to wear to school today.
But now when I think about it, I mean, isn't your whole job now to kind of figure out the right sneaker for the brand? Do you know what I'm saying?
That's why I'm good at it.
Right. Because you actually had to think about it. This is like a new, different thing. You are actually thinking about why, kind of anthropologically, we have these conversations with each other.
Here's a funny anecdote.
Yeah.
So my executive producer now, Kathy Humphrey, she and I met in 9th grade in graphic design class. That's how long we've known each other for.
Yeah.
And we've been working together closely for the last 7 years. But I think for most of our careers, we've been either working at the same company or working together through some contract. But our first big project together, when I think I was 13, she was 14, and we've decided that we were going to rebrand ourselves.
Okay.
So
what did that mean at the time?
It meant that we were freshmen in high school, and we were not having a very good time. And we realized that in order to have a better time, we would require different jeans.
So, like, we went with, like, a goth look?
No. No. This was Brooklyn. This was 1991, and what was in was hip-hop.
Okay. So we went that route.
And that's where we went.
Rebrand.
Total rebrand.
Done.
Total rebrand done, and we still joke around. Obviously, we work together, on a daily basis now, doing rebrands for everybody else.
Yeah.
But we always laugh. That was our first rebranding project, and it worked.
So what was the style then? These kind of sneakers, these kind of jeans.
Yeah.
These kind of, what was it? Do you remember the brands?
We had both saved up and bought ourselves giant pairs of lime green cross-colored jeans.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And if there's anyone listening to this podcast that remembers,
oh, sure.
do you remember those?
Of course.
They were ridiculous.
Yeah, no, but very cool, though.
They were so... I would love to get a pair now.
At the time, they were very cool. What kind of footwear? Because we're kind of centering this on...
I think it was Fila. I think it was Fila.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's...
All I remember is my mom hated them.
Well, sure, but that's your duty as a teenager.
To upset her for as long as I can.
No matter the country, I think, is really...
I was very good at that.
But now you said you were in graphic design class. I'm trying to think back to when I was a freshman in high school, and I remember math and science and history.
Right.
I don't remember graphic design class.
So I was quite fortunate.
Yeah.
I went to Murrow, which was a somewhat experimental high school in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And they had a phenomenal music program. They had a music theater program.
Okay.
They had a tremendous arts program.
Wow.
And
this was a private school?
No.
This was a public school?
This was a public school. They had a television studio, obviously being named after E.R. Murrow.
Oh, I see. I didn't catch the... It's Edward R. Murrow.
Edward R. Murrow, yeah.
So that's the school.
That is the school.
I misheard you saying something else. It's my ears, not your accent.
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I think it's probably my accent, but we'll let it slide.
Okay, fair enough. So there you are in this school, kind of getting a chance to really find out what you're good at. And so besides just wanting to do everything, because you seem like that kind of person, because now we know each other for 12 minutes, what was it that you were immediately attracted to, and was that the right thing, or did you kind of just want to do everything, or what?
All I wanted to do was art.
Okay.
I was a terrible high school attendee.
Meaning you were
meaning
tardy? You were tardy
I
in
basically cut everything outside of my art classes.
Really?
I managed to get out quickly.
Mm-hmm. You graduated early.
I did, but I cracked the code. I mean, remember, I spent the first 4 of my years of education in the Soviet Union, which had probably one of the best education systems in the world.
Well, you would say that, right? I mean, come on.
I would say that, but having gone through both, I know this to be true.
Yeah, you have anecdotal information that might support that theory.
Yeah. So, I just realized that, the art classes were the ones that I enjoyed.
So what kind of art are we talking about?
We had a year worth of fashion design classes.
Uh-huh.
And that was my first calling. My mom is a fashion designer. She did that her whole entire life.
Well, let's take this tangent, because your father and mother kind of leave the Soviet Union.
Me and my mother.
Okay.
Yeah,
now thank you
it's going to get interesting.
Thank you for clarifying. And your father kind of hung back type of deal.
My father decided to hang back, yeah.
Okay. And that was a decision, I feel like, that they made.
I think it was more a decision that he made.
Uh-huh. I'm not coming with you. Or was was it more about the relationship, or was it more about the leaving, is what I'm asking?
I think it was about both.
Okay.
They got a divorce. He had the option to come with us.
Right.
But I think he felt that it was just too late in life for him.
Got it.
To do something this crazy, whereas my mom is just crazy, so
sure. All right,
she said, why not?
So single mother, and do you have brothers or sisters?
I have 2 brothers. They're twins, but they
younger?
are 15 years older, so they actually stayed.
They stayed.
They stayed. Right. They didn't come over until 91.
All right, so single mother with 1 daughter, child. Here we go. Here we come. Here we come,
I'm leaving my
America.
2 grown sons here, and I am going to, that's my mom.
What was her job there?
So there, and this is an interesting fact I didn't really piece together until I was much older.
Yeah.
My mom spent her entire life in the Soviet Union,
right,
running a private business.
How?
Out of her house.
How did she do that?
She did that. It sounds really, really innocent to us. Yeah. She made designer dresses for women,
right,
on order.
This is not permitted.
This is not permitted.
And she just did it. Wow. So she was an entrepreneur. So
she quite literally ran an illegal operation for some 30 years before she left the USSR.
What do you think her motivation was for breaking the law?
Well, for one, I think from a creative perspective, there really wasn't a fashion industry.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? If she wanted to just make clothes and design clothes, unless she went to work at a factory somewhere, which just doesn't sound all that enticing.
No, it does
I don't know much about Soviet factories, but I can surmise that it's not a great choice.
But you're like normalizing this conversation.
I am totally normalizing this conversation.
You're making it seem like, well, she had the option to go to the factory, and she decided, I'm not going to do the factory, so I'll just do it out of my house. That's not.
She was a spirited woman.
Yeah, but that's not quite it, right? I mean, this is beyond spirited. This is dangerous.
I recall when I was little, I couldn't tell people what my mom did for a living.
Yeah.
And my dad was very careful to take all of the scraps of clothing to the garage and burn it somewhere out there so that there wasn't this constant stream of fabric scraps.
Right. Evidence.
Yeah. She wasn't keen on my friends coming over.
Right.
But it was allowed.
Huh.
I love how far this conversation has just
Well,
strayed.
So that's fine.
I love
this.
this.
And so then, but this gives us the understanding of how this single mother with a child, one child, could come to the United States and be okay. Like if I can be an entrepreneur there, you know, finding a job or finding a way to make money, I'm not really concerned.
I think that's very fair to say, yes.
Yeah. So what did she wind up doing?
So her first job was doing alterations at Henry Bendel.
Oh, let's go to the top, right? Why not?
She would take overflow from Chanel.
Yeah.
Because obviously I think every alteration department in Manhattan, everyone knows each other. It's a very small world. People move around all the time. So, you know, Chanel folks would walk into Henry Bendel and say, guys, if anybody wants to take some work home, we're struggling.
She raises her hand.
She would raise her hand.
There
So, of course, I got to try most of it on. Which was pretty excellent.
Which then gives us a now really good understanding of what your relationship with brand was in the Soviet Union, what your relationship was when you got here, right?
Right.
Then the kind of the rebranding, right, that we did, which was wonderful. And then the art, which you fell in love with. So where did you then go to university?
So I got accepted into Parsons.
So School of Design.
School of Design for fashion.
Top of the top.
Top of the top. And then I was ready to go, and then I realized that meant staying in New York, and that meant living at home.
Oh.
And I decided that I wanted out. So I applied to what was the only school on the East Coast that was still accepting September applications in July.
South Carolina?
No.
Because I thought
Philadelphia.
Okay.
University of the Arts.
You know where I was putting you. It's SCAD, right? Yeah.
SCAD would have been a better choice.
Yeah, okay. So Philadelphia, you wound up at...
So I wound up at University of the Arts, a school I've never heard of prior to applying.
How did we do there?
We did okay. They didn't have a fashion program, but they had a freshman year sort of foundation program.
Right.
So my thought was, I don't have to think about a major.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get out. I'm gonna go, and then we'll see what happens.
Let's explore.
And what happened was, during that year, I thought I was gonna try for fine art. I put fashion aside, I think, because I realized that was just not an industry I wanted to be a part of. I loved it. It was super interesting, but there was just something about the
People.
I don't want to offend any fashion designers here. It seemed very vacuous at the end of the day, and I didn't want to be around that 24/7 and base my entire career on it. So then I thought about fine art, and then I went to one gallery opening, and I realized that was probably even more vacuous. And then a friend of mine who was graduating sat me down and said, check out animation. You should be an animation major. And I said, Drew, I don't know anything about animation.
Yeah, Drew.
I don't care about animation. Right. I don't understand animation. What's animation?
Right.
And he showed me a bunch of stuff. And he was probably the first 3D animator at that school.
Yeah.
This was the mid-'90s.
Sure.
They were lagging behind in technology.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, so I don't have to do like characters, and I can just sort of make abstract worlds, and okay, this could be cool.
Yeah.
And the deadline to select the major came, and I said, all right, and then animation.
Animation. So
what a way to settle on a career.
What a way to settle on a career. But it does seem like you weren't interested in becoming the next Walt Disney.
Not at all.
It does seem that you had commerce in mind. And so when you graduated,
I think what I had in mind was still sort of being some weird experimental artist.
Oh, you were still going to do that?
I was still going to do that.
And then when you graduated?
Well, when I graduated, I realized that it made my mom really happy the moment that I realized that there's lots of things you can't do without money.
Right.
And, we went through, I'm from an immigrant family, single mom.
Yeah.
There was really no fallback plan.
No.
She helped me through school as much as she could, and now I was on my own, and I had to find a job. I tried to apply to graduate school.
Uh-huh.
They turned me down.
Sure.
And then I really
Maria,
had no other answer.
We're not going to give you money for this. So find a job. And you did, I'm sure, at where?
Well, it took a while, actually.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite that easy. I was teaching for a while.
Teaching
Animation.
To who?
To kids, to amateur adults.
Was that something that you appreciated doing, or was that a means to an end?
It was a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't feel qualified teaching anyone, considering that I was just out of school and couldn't find a real job.
Sure,
it was really like that. The emphasis was on those who can't do.
Right. Yeah. A true example of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
it didn't feel too great. But I found a job eventually.
Yeah.
So I moved back to New York, realizing that Philadelphia really wasn't a hub of employment opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the late 90s at this point. I had to turn down a lot of offers for web design, which I knew I did not want to do.
Okay.
So I found a job at a very small company up in Westchester, and I was so excited that someone called me back. I didn't even ask them how much I was going to be making, which was a huge mistake.
Right.
So I found out I wasn't going to be making very much at all. And I sucked it up for probably about 9 months.
Yeah.
It was a really terrible, terrible place to work at for a number of reasons. But, I stuck it out for as long as I could.
Yeah.
The only thing that came out of that job is I figured out what motion graphics was.
Good.
It didn't exist in college.
Right.
And that's what I started doing, and I realized that I was good at it, and I realized that, if I was going to try and look for positions in this field, I could probably do okay.
So you've got a fair amount of history at your firm, and I wonder when you realized that you could do this, that this could be, you don't have to work for somebody, you're going to do what Mom used to do, which is create an entire commerce world where there isn't one.
Right.
When did you kind of come to understand that?
So after I left my first job,
Yeah.
I landed at a post-production company.
Okay.
And I was there for a little over 5 years.
Yeah.
I was there, I think, third employee or second. So it was a really small company, and it was really great for a very long time. And then at some point, all of the sort of entrepreneurial problems began to trickle down towards the employees.
Oh, sure.
So things like, we're not getting paid enough, and we don't have the right kind of clients. And, at some point I sat down and I thought, I'm putting in this much effort to think this stuff through for someone else. I have really little control to implement anything that I think is going to be useful. Now, mind you, I was like 24.
Sure.
I'm not sure how much useful implementation I could have done. I looked around and I thought I really should be doing this for myself.
Yeah.
And my boyfriend at the time was also another motion graphics designer, and he said, we should start a company. And I said, we're not ready.
Yeah.
We don't know what the hell we're doing,
Right.
and this is a really bad idea. And he said, well, we should get a name. So we got a name. And for the first probably year or two, I was freelancing.
Yeah.
And then slowly, that somehow we got some clients on board. And then when we parted ways in 2010, I sort of was at this crossroads of, do I try this again?
Yeah.
It was successful in a sense that, we didn't starve.
Right.
We maintained our lifestyle.
Sure.
Looking back on it, I don't think it was a very successful company. I just think it was a very successful experiment in being self-employed.
It was practice, Maria.
It was practice.
There you
It was
go.
a practice run. So in 2010,
Kicked off this whole thing.
that's when I kicked this off.
All right. Now let's go through some of the clients and what you understand about the customer of those clients. So when you're creating the content that you're creating, when you're creating the media that you're creating, who do you have in mind? MoMA,
tell us something about that customer.
So MoMA is pretty amazing because, I mean, it's the Museum of Modern Art.
Right.
You know, when I first started working with them, I said, you know, when I put out to the universe that I one day wanted to see my work at MoMA, I should have been more specific.
Yeah.
I meant like my work on a wall.
In there, exactly.
Yeah. But you know, I'll take what I can get.
Right.
The great thing about them is, you know, they attract great talent because they're MoMA. So from a purely creative perspective, I would say companies like the NHL attract people who are amazing at marketing, who really understand sports.
Right.
MoMA attracts artists. So even the materials that we get to work with are different.
Yeah.
You know, they're
And do you see that in the customer set as well? In other words, these are aspirational artists, or these are...
Of course.
Right.
I mean, it's, you know, it's a cultural institution.
Yeah.
It's we did a promo where Paolo Antonelli, who's one of their curators, did the entire voiceover for this promo. And, you know, if you're trying to point out my accent,
You got nothing on.
She's amazing.
Right.
And I remember thinking that for no other promo spot would this fly.
Yeah.
She's got such a heavy Italian accent, but it makes sense.
That customer will eat that up.
Right, because she's an Italian woman, art lover, curator. Like, of course, it makes sense that she should do the voiceover.
So that's fantastic. I could speak to you all day, but you know we are very busy people. We
are here with
to do.
6,000 other people.
So I have 3 final questions. I'll tell you what they are, and I'll ask you them in order.
Okay.
What has most surprised you at work? What has most surprised you in life? And then on the soundtrack of your life, one track, one song that's got to be on there. But first things first, because that's usually the toughest one, right? What has most surprised you at work?
What has most surprised me at work? When I started my career as a creative, the thing I was concerned about most was the kind of projects I'm working on, the kind of cachet that a client has. Is this high end? Is this too low end for my portfolio?
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, I've been hanging out with Henry Bendel. What are we doing over here, right? You know?
The most interesting thing is building my own company has made me understand that really what I'm happiest about is the fact that for some reason, I've got people who continue to put their own jobs on the line by giving me work.
There you go.
And there
Brave.
is really nothing better than that. It doesn't matter who the client is. It doesn't matter who the job is for.
These are brave people, is what you're saying.
Brave people, very brave people. I tell them this all the time.
What has most surprised you in life?
There are many things in my life that I was absolutely certain I would never, ever, 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 ever do. And I have learned that I really can never say never.
Okay.
And I'm the kind of person who really thinks the stuff through, you know?
Do you want to just unpack that slightly?
No, we're done.
No.
There's one final question.
Just could you give us just an inkling of what you're talking about?
I think the best recent example is I spent years saying I would never, ever get married.
There you go. And that,
I've been married for the past 6 months.
well,
and
congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But, I thought I had really thought that one through.
Yeah.
And, life has weird ways of
Changing
your perspectives.
There you go. On the soundtrack of your life.
Oh, man.
One track, one song that's got to be on
That is rough. No Sleep Till Brooklyn.
The Beastie Boys, ladies and gentlemen. Maria, this has been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been a really great start to my day.
There we go.
And there you have Maria Rapetskaya. That kind of experience of coming from the USSR to the United States of America, I feel like with her mother being an entrepreneur in, the former Soviet Union, it's fascinating to me. So very much appreciate Maria's time, very much appreciate your time. Thanks for listening and stay tuned.